The phone rang at exactly 2:17 a.m., ripping me out of a deep, dreamless sleep in my luxury hotel suite in Tokyo. I was thousands of miles from home, in the middle of finalizing one of the biggest real estate acquisition deals of my career. And the very last thing I expected was a call from my father at that hour. When I saw his name glowing on the screen, a sudden knot formed in my stomach. Something was wrong. I could feel it. I answered immediately. "Dad? Is everything all right?" There was a brief pause before he spoke, and when he did, his voice carried that familiar mix of forced concern and barely hidden satisfaction. "Jessica, I've got bad news," he said slowly. "Your apartment building is on fire. I'm watching it on the news right now." I shot upright in bed, every trace of sleep instantly gone. "What? Which building?" I demanded. "The Grand View Apartments on 5th Street, he replied. "You know, the tiny studio you live in? The whole place is going up in flames. The fire department has been there for over 2 hours. My heart raced as I grabbed my laptop and started pulling up local news streams. Within seconds, the live footage confirmed it. There was the Grand View residential complex, flames flickering from several windows, thick smoke curling into the night sky, fire trucks lining the street, and firefighters rushing in and out of the building. "I hope you at least had renter's insurance," Dad added, his tone slipping into the patronizing voice I knew far too well. "Though I doubt whatever policy you could afford would cover much. Maybe this is a sign you should finally stop pretending you can live independently and move back home." And that's when I started laughing. Not a polite chuckle or nervous giggle, but full, uncontrollable laughter that echoed through the quiet hotel room. "Jessica, why are you laughing?" Dad snapped. "This is a serious situation." I tried to study my breath, but the irony was overwhelming. "Because, Dad," I said between laughs, "that building isn't just where I live." There was a brief pause. "What do you mean?" he asked suspiciously. "I mean, I own it." The line went completely quiet. Several long seconds passed before he spoke again. "What did you just say?" he whispered. "The Grand View residential complex," I repeated calmly. "I purchased it 18 months ago through Summit Property Holdings. I own the entire building, Dad, all 47 units." Another long pause followed, heavier than the last. "That's impossible," he finally said. "You live in a studio apartment. You can barely afford rent." I smiled to myself. I live in the penthouse unit, which I personally designed and renovated, and I've never struggled with rent because I pay it to myself. I could almost hear the confusion crashing through his thoughts. "Jessica, this isn't funny. I'm trying to help you deal with a crisis." "Dad," I replied, glancing back at my laptop, "I'm watching 6 different live broadcasts. The fire is already under control. It was limited to the 3rd and 4th floors, and my building's sprinkler and fire suppression systems activated exactly the way they were designed to." He hesitated. "Your building?" "Yes, my building," I said, "and it's insured for $12 million, by the way. So yes, I absolutely have insurance." The silence that followed was almost deafening. I imagined him sitting there trying to process everything. "12 million?" he finally murmured. "That's just for the Grand View complex," I added. "My entire real estate portfolio is worth around $420 million. This time, the silence stretched so long I thought the call had disconnected. "Dad, are you still there?" I asked. 400? "Jessica, what are you talking about?" he stammered. "You work in customer service at some tech company." "I work in customer service for my own tech company," I corrected gently. "Summit Property Holdings and Summit Technologies. I founded both companies 6 years ago." I walked over to the wide window of my suite and looked out at the glowing Tokyo skyline, neon lights reflecting off glass towers. In just a few hours, I would be signing documents that would add another $50 million in commercial properties to my portfolio. Dad, we need to have a serious conversation. But first, I need to take care of my building. I opened my laptop fully and logged into the emergency management system I had installed across all my properties. Within minutes, I was connected with the fire chief on scene, my property manager, and my insurance representative. Chief Morrison, this is Jessica Chin, owner of the Grandview Complex. Can you give me a status update? Miss Chin, good to hear from you, he replied. The fire started in Unit 3B due to a malfunctioning space heater. Our suppression systems activated immediately, and we were able to contain the damage to Units 3B and 4A. There are no injuries, and the rest of the building is completely secure. That's excellent, I said. What about the residents from the affected units? They've been safely relocated to temporary housing, he explained. Your property manager already implemented the emergency housing protocol you designed. Perfect, I nodded. And the estimated damage? Initial assessments put it at around $80,000, he said. Nothing that can't be repaired within 2 weeks. $80,000. Dad was panicking about me losing everything, and the actual damage was less than what I'd spent on art for my penthouse. Thank you, Chief. Please keep me updated. I ended the call and realized Dad had been listening to the entire conversation. Jessica, he said quietly. Who? Just talking to the fire chief. Like I said, it's my building. When you own property, you get involved when there are emergencies. But how? When did you? I don't understand any of this. I settled back into bed, knowing this conversation was going to take a while. Dad, what exactly do you think I've been doing for the past 6 years? Working customer service, struggling to pay rent on that tiny apartment, refusing our help because you're too proud to admit you need it. The description stung because it was so far from reality, yet it reflected what my family genuinely believed about my life. Dad, I haven't struggled to pay rent in over 5 years. I bought my first property when I was 26 with money I made developing a customer service software platform. Customer service software. I noticed that most companies were using outdated, inefficient systems for managing customer interactions. So I developed an AI-enhanced platform that could handle multiple communication channels simultaneously while providing better service outcomes. I could hear him breathing, but not speaking. That software is now used by about 4,000 companies worldwide. The licensing fees alone generate $15 million annually. $15 million? That was just the beginning. I used those profits to start buying undervalued properties, renovating them, and either selling or renting them at market rates. Each successful project funded larger acquisitions. But Jessica, you live so modestly. Your apartment, your car, your clothes. Dad, I live in a 2,000 square foot penthouse with a private rooftop garden. I drive a Tesla Model S, and my clothes are custom made by a designer in Milan. That's impossible. We've seen your apartment. You've seen my guest bathroom and kitchen when you stopped by unannounced. I've never given you a full tour because every time you visit, you make comments about how I should give up and move home. The accusation hung in the air between us. We just want what's best for you, he said defensively. What you want is for me to fit your definition of success. When I chose tech over law school, you decided I was making a mistake. When I moved into my own place instead of staying home, you assumed I was struggling. You've never actually asked about my business or my life. But if you're so successful, why didn't you tell us? I tried to, Dad. Remember 3 years ago when I invited you and Mom to the Tech Innovation Awards ceremony? I was receiving an award for my customer service platform. You said it was some work party. I said it was a work event where I was being recognized for my achievements. You said you were too busy to attend some customer service appreciation dinner. I could hear him thinking, probably remembering that conversation differently than I did. What about when I offered to help with Mom's medical bills last year? You told me to focus on my own finances instead of trying to help with expenses I couldn't afford. Because we thought you were barely making ends meet. I was offering to pay $60,000 in medical bills, Dad. Did that not seem like a clue that maybe your assumptions about my finances were wrong? Another long silence. Jessica, if you have all this money, why do you live so normally? Because I learned from watching you and Mom that flashy displays of wealth often mask financial insecurity. I prefer to invest in assets that appreciate rather than liabilities that impress people. My phone chimed with a text from my property manager. Fire completely out, damage minimal. All residents safely relocated. Building will be fully operational by Monday. Dad, I need to ask you something. When you called to tell me about the fire, you sounded almost pleased. Why? I wasn't pleased about the fire, Jessica. I was concerned about you. But you immediately jumped to telling me this was a sign I should give up and move home. That doesn't sound like concern. That sounds like you were hoping I'd fail. That's not... I just think you've been struggling for so long, and maybe this would be the push you needed to accept help. Dad, I haven't needed help in years, but you've been so convinced that I'm failing that you can't see my success. I pulled up my portfolio on my laptop, taking screenshots of key properties and financial summaries. I'm going to send you some information. Property deeds, business registration documents, financial statements. I want you to understand what I've actually built. Jessica, you don't need to prove anything to me. Shh. I do, because until you understand what my life really looks like, we can't have an honest relationship. I sent the files and waited while he presumably opened them on his end. Jesus Christ, he whispered. Jessica, these numbers, are these real? They're real. Summit Property Holdings owns 43 residential and commercial properties across 4 states. Summit Technologies has 12 software patents and licensing agreements with Fortune 500 companies. But how did you do all this without us knowing? You weren't paying attention. Every time I tried to share my success, you changed the subject or minimized it. Eventually, I stopped trying. My hotel room phone rang, the front desk informing me that my car would be ready in 30 minutes for my meetings with the Tokyo property development firm, that I have to go. In Tokyo, closing a deal that will add another $50 million to my portfolio. You're in Tokyo. How long have you been traveling for business? About 3 years regularly. This is my 4th trip to Asia this year. We thought you couldn't afford to travel. I take 6 to 8 international business trips annually. I just stopped telling you about them because you always responded with concerns about me spending money I supposedly didn't have. I could hear multiple voices in the background on Dad's end. "Is that Mom?" I asked. She woke up when I was watching the news. "Jessica, she's going to want to talk to you." Put her on speaker. "Jessica, honey?" Mom's voice came through thick with sleep and confusion. "Your father's been telling me the strangest things about buildings and businesses." "Hi, Mom. Dad's telling you the truth. I own the building that was on fire tonight, along with 42 other properties." "But sweetheart, that doesn't make sense. You work in customer service." "I own a customer service technology company that serves 4,000 businesses worldwide." 4,000? Mom, remember when you were worried about my health insurance last year? I wasn't unemployed. I have premium medical coverage through my companies, plus additional coverage for international travel. But you said you were between jobs. I said I was transitioning between projects. You assumed that meant I was unemployed. I heard Mom whisper to Dad, "Show me those papers you were looking at." Several minutes passed while they reviewed the documents I'd sent. "Jessica," Mom said finally, "these bank statements, are you really worth about $260 million in liquid assets, plus property holdings worth approximately $420 million? So yes, I'm doing okay financially." "My God," Dad breathed. "Jessica, you're successful." "I'm successful, Dad. I have been for years. But why didn't you tell us?" "I tried, but every conversation became about your concerns for my financial security or suggestions that I should move home and get a real job." Mom spoke up. "Honey, we were just worried about you living alone, working so hard." "Mom, I have a full staff. Property managers, accountants, legal team, technology developers. I haven't worked alone in 4 years." "A staff? 37 employees across both companies." The silence stretched again as they processed this information. "Jessica," Dad said slowly, "when you offered to help with Mom's medical bills, I was offering to pay them outright. $60,000 wouldn't have affected my budget at all. And when we said you should focus on your own expenses, you were telling a multi-millionaire to stop trying to help her family because she needed to worry about her own rent money." I heard Mom start crying. "Oh, sweetheart, we've been such fools." "You weren't fools. You made assumptions based on limited information and your own fears about my choices." "But we should have listened better," Dad said. "We should have asked more questions instead of assuming we knew what was happening in your life." My phone buzzed with a text. "Car ready downstairs for Sakura development meeting. I really do have to go, but when I get back from Tokyo, I'd like to take you both to dinner somewhere nice. My treat, Jessica." Dad said about the fire tonight. "The fire is handled. Insurance will cover everything. Residents are safely housed, and the building will be fully operational by Monday." "And you're really okay, Dad?" "I'm more than okay. I'm successful, independent, and happy with what I've built." "We're proud of you," Mom said, her voice still shaky. "We should have said that years ago." "Thanks, Mom. That means a lot." After ending the call, I gathered my materials for the Tokyo meetings, thinking about the strange turn the night had taken. What began as my father calling to deliver bad news about a tragedy had become the moment my family finally learned the truth about my life. The irony wasn't lost on me that it took a fire for them to finally see clearly. 3 days later, I returned from Tokyo with signed contracts for a major commercial development project. The Grandview fire damage had been completely repaired, and all residents were back in their units. But more importantly, I had plans to have dinner with my parents for the first time in 2 years. I picked them up in my Tesla, watching their faces as they took in the car's features and technology. "This is beautiful, Jessica," Mom said, running her hand along the leather seats. "How long have you had it?" "About 18 months. It's actually my second Tesla. I traded up when the new model came out." We drove to Lumiere, one of the city's most exclusive restaurants. Dad's eyes widened when we pulled up to the valet stand. "Jessica, this place is very expensive." "Dad, I made $3.2 million in Tokyo this week. I think I can handle dinner." The maitre d' greeted me by name and led us to my usual table, a private booth with a view of the city skyline. "Miss Chin, so wonderful to see you again. Will you be having your usual?" "Thank you, Henry. We'll start with a bottle of the 2015 Bordeaux, and then I'll let my parents choose their own meals." After Henry left, Dad leaned forward. "You have a usual table here?" "I do a lot of business entertaining. This is convenient for client dinners." Mom picked up the menu and immediately set it down. "Jessica, these prices are..." "Exactly what I expected to pay. Order whatever you want." As we settled into dinner, the conversation gradually shifted from amazement about my success to genuine curiosity about my life and work. "Tell us about Tokyo," Dad said. "What kind of deal were you working on?" "Commercial real estate development. I'm partnering with a Japanese firm to build a mixed-use complex in downtown Osaka. Residential units, office space, and retail." "That sounds incredibly complex." "It is, but that's what makes it interesting. Plus, the profit margin on international development is substantially higher than domestic projects." Mom smiled. "You sound so confident when you talk about business. I remember when you were little, you used to reorganize your toys like you were running a company." "Some things never change. I just reorganize buildings now instead of toys." Dad reached across the table and took my hand. "Jessica, I owe you an apology, not just for tonight, but for years of not seeing what you were accomplishing." "Dad, you don't need to." "Yes, I do. I was so focused on what I thought your life should look like that I completely missed what your life actually looked like." "We both did," Mom added. We've been treating our successful daughter like she needed our help when she's been more successful than we ever imagined. I squeezed Dad's hand. I appreciate that, but I need you both to understand something. I didn't build this empire to prove you wrong or to show off. I built it because I saw opportunities and had the skills to capitalize on them. And we're incredibly proud of what you've built, Dad said. I just wish we'd been supporting you instead of doubting you. You can support me now, I replied, by asking about my life instead of assuming you know what's happening in it. Deal, Mom said immediately. In fact, I want to know everything. Start from the beginning and tell us how you built all of this. So I did. Over the course of a 3-hour dinner, I walked them through every major decision, every key investment, every pivotal moment that had led to where I was today. They listened with fascination, asking questions and expressing amazement at the scope of what I'd accomplished. The customer service software was just the foundation, I explained. But real estate is where I found my passion. There's something satisfying about taking a rundown building and transforming it into something beautiful and functional. Like the Grand View complex? Dad asked. Exactly. When I bought it, half the units were vacant and the building was falling apart. I spent 8 months completely renovating it, improving the infrastructure, adding modern amenities. Now it's one of the most desirable residential buildings in the area. And the penthouse, where you live? I designed it myself. 2,000 square feet, floor-to-ceiling windows, a private rooftop garden, and a home office that overlooks the city. Mom shook her head in amazement. We thought you were living in a tiny studio. You thought that because I never invited you over. Every time you visited, you made comments about me needing to move home or get a better job. It was easier to let you see just the kitchen and bathroom than to deal with lectures about responsible living. We won't do that anymore, Dad promised. In fact, we'd love to see your real home sometime. I'd like that. Maybe this weekend. As we finished dinner and prepared to leave, Dad looked around the elegant restaurant one more time. Jessica, can I ask you something personal? Of course. Are you happy with all of this success, all these businesses? Are you fulfilled? I considered the question carefully. I am. I love what I do. I'm proud of what I've built, and I'm excited about future projects. The only thing that's been missing is being able to share it with family. Well, that changes now, Mom said firmly. We want to be part of your life, your real life. I'd like that very much. As I drove them home, Dad spoke up from the passenger seat. Jessica, about that fire call. What about it? I realize now that I was calling to deliver bad news to someone I thought couldn't handle bad news, but you handled it like a handling a minor business inconvenience. Because that's exactly what it was. I'm proud of who you've become, he said quietly, and I'm sorry it took a fire for me to finally see it. Dad, sometimes it takes a crisis to illuminate the truth, but what matters is that we're finally seeing each other clearly. A week later, I gave my parents a complete tour of the Grand View penthouse, my office building, and 3 of my other residential properties. They met my property managers, my chief technology officer, and my head of acquisitions. Your daughter, my CTO told them, is one of the most innovative minds in technology and real estate. We're lucky to work for her. Dad beamed with pride. We're just beginning to understand how lucky we are to be her parents. That evening, as we sat on my rooftop garden watching the sunset over the city, Mom asked one final question. Jessica, what's next? What's your next big goal? I smiled, looking out at the skyline, where several of my buildings were visible in the distance. International expansion. I'm looking at opportunities in London, Sydney, and Singapore. The goal is to have Summit Holdings operating on 4 continents within 5 years. That sounds amazing, Dad said. And this time, we want to hear about every step of the journey. I'd like that, I replied. It's much better when you have family cheering you on instead of worrying about you. Sometimes it takes a fire to light the way to truth. In my case, it lit the way to a better relationship with the people who matter most.